Here's more from the EU's Foreign Minister, Josep Borrell.
Well, today is going to be a very long day.
War crime, a massive war crime, what's happening in Mariupol. The city will be completely destroyed and people are dying.
EU foreign and defense ministers are meeting today in Brussels. And speaking today, the foreign ministers of Lithuania and Ireland said the EU should step up on sanctions on Russia to target its lucrative energy sector. Well, for more now on the situation in Mariupol at the moment, let's bring in France 24's Doug Herbert. Doug, we saw those images just moments ago of the city, how devastated it's been. What exactly is Russia's strategy here? Does it want to completely destroy the strategic port city?
That's the military strategy. Look, we had a very good sort of messaging of that. The general we heard in that report from Mariupol, Misintsev, he basically is the same man who he's Putin's crony, close associate of Putin, who headed up the siege of Aleppo in Syria. You'll remember that was when Syrian government forces of Bashar Assad and their allies, plus backed by Russia, that key term, backed by Russia air power, laid siege, devastating artillery and aerial siege, starting in September 2016 to Aleppo. We know what happened 4 months later, by December 16th, when the government fully recaptured Aleppo. It was a city that was devastated beyond recognition. It was a pile of rubble. They basically blasted the civilians, the residences, the schools, the hospitals to smithereens. We are seeing not perhaps the same scale, magnitude yet as in Aleppo, but getting there. We are seeing basically a strategy in which the bombardment of civilian infrastructure is militarily acceptable. I'll say that again. By Russian doctrine, it is militarily acceptable to bomb whatever it takes, civilian infrastructure, apartment blocks, entire city residential complexes, to bomb them out of existence into oblivion. Why? Because those civilians are, by just virtue of where they happen to be and where they happen to live, they are complicit. They become the enemy. They become suspect. They become suspect elements that must be rooted out. They are fair and legitimate targets by Russian military doctrine. Now, of course, as you know, the Russians deny to the hilt that they are deliberately bombing civilian targets. But time and again, when Russia intervenes, whether it is in Chechnya, which was perhaps even worse than Aleppo, if that's even possible, first in the 90s before Putin, but then under Putin in the early 2000s, the devastation there was such that it was literally 100% of the city was devastated. It had to be completely rebuilt and everyone flushed out. So what we're seeing is basically a blueprint. We have had a Russian lawmaker in the past, a guy named Alexei Arbatov. We're going back 20 years, more, 2000. He basically said, I wrote this down because the quote is unbelievable, and I had actually forgotten it. Massive devastation and collateral fatalities among the civilian population are acceptable in order to limit one's own casualties. He basically was saying it. This was 20 years ago in 2000, saying something that would horrify the West. Now, yes, viewers will reasonably say, oh, as if the U.S. are angels in all this, the U.S. with their drones and using drones and hitting weddings and funerals in Iraq and Afghanistan. Yes, they do. But the official military doctrine in the United States is to make an effort to avoid civilian casualties wherever possible. And yes, there have been awful, horrific incidents on the part of the U.S. in which civilians have been collateral damage, as the military like to say. Civilians have been killed on the ground. There are no angels in this. But what's devastating with Russia is Vladimir Putin, in the name of achieving his aims, his objective, which is a purified Russian world, purged of any dissenting or enemy or suspect elements. This is how you go about doing it. When you can't make progress or you're stalled or bogged down in your ground offensive, as Russia has been, even though it will not say that, acknowledge that, this is the way they do it. You start to bomb until a war of attrition. You bomb them into a stalemate. Then maybe you sit down at a negotiating table. But even then, the negotiations perhaps aren't in good faith either.
Right.